On a recent trip back to France, Amélie made a stop to visit an old friend in Sofia, Bulgaria. While there, she was taken aback by the amount of green space dedicated in certain parts of the city, and she decided that Baiemont needs a neighborhood that takes after that. So, under her direction, the Baiemont Property Group is breaking ground on a new neighborhood next to Baiemont Community College, taking inspiration from the Eastern European capital city. This new development spurs on additional demand at Baiemont, and Amélie can finally see her true vision coming to fruition. Meanwhile, county officials have decided that they need to start defining smaller districts in order to spread city services across the county more effectively. With these new districts defined, the county is turning to its citizens to provide input for names. And on that last part, I will be showing a graphic of all the new neighborhoods later in the video, so if you want to provide any input on that in the comments, stay tuned for that. Before I get to any of these larger projects though, what I want to do first is address two missing services in Baiemont, and these are postal and telecommunication services. I think where I want to put the postal service is right on this corner right here, and I want to put it in this Japanese asset. I just think it's like a proper scale, and one thing that I do like that it does is it kind of creates a bit of a gradient down from these larger French buildings down to this building, and then finally down to our residential. I'm also seeing this massive tornado, so hopefully that stays over there on the water. I guess I'll ignore it for now. The other thing on the postal front is I'll have to probably add in a few mailboxes just to serve the rest of the city well. And it looks like right here in the downtown area, we are a little bit lacking. So I'm gonna go ahead and put one probably over here on this corner because it's on the road. And I don't know if that just deleted that building. It looks like it might have. That's okay, it'll build back. The other place I think I want to put one is likely over in this area. I don't know that I necessarily need one, but I'll just throw one on the corner there, and that should be pretty good coverage for Baiemont. And on the telecom front, I think I'll just put in one of these Japanese radio masts. I think just right here along the highway is a good enough place for it. I'll put it kind of as close as I can get it right here. It doesn't really cover all that much, and part of that is just the density in the downtown of Baiemont requires a lot of bandwidth, so I may need to put another one in later on, probably near this college is where I would guess. For now, I'm just going to leave it as is. At least they have something now in Baiemont in terms of telecom coverage. Before I move on to the next part of today's episode, which is going to be building out this neighborhood right here next to the college, one thing I want to look at is our public transportation utilization. And I think I've been going about that kind of the wrong way. What I've been doing is I've been clicking on my public transit tab here, and then just clicking on the bus lines and looking at their usage. I think that's not the best way to go about it. The reason being that right now it is, let's see, 8:43 p.m. or 20:44 for my international friends. So that's pretty late into the evening, and likely the usage is a little bit lower than it might be, say, at 9 in the morning or something like that. So a better way to probably look at this is to actually go in here to our graphs here, and if I click on public transit, let me bring that drop down menu down so I can get rid of truck cargo, because that's just a huge amount of stuff that's coming out of truck cargo. So if I get rid of that, and then I increase the time scale all the way up to 5 years, I can kind of get a good sense of the amount of people who've been taking the bus in Costanoa. And you can see right when I introduced it, the usage was relatively low and it kind of stabilized around this area. And then the introduction of the Baiemont line looks to have maybe not doubled it, but somewhat close to doubled the amount of utilization of the buses. And what this is telling me is that that Baiemont line between Baiemont and Costanoa is going to continue growing most likely, especially with the build out of Baiemont. And I think what I'll have to do, and I'm just going to do this now while I'm here, is I'm going to have to increase the number of buses on CMTA4, which is that line that pings back and forth. So I'm going to go ahead and increase it to probably 6 for now. That should be plenty. It should cover even the expansion of Baiemont in my estimation. And with that taken care of, I think it's a good time to take on the build out of this particular triangle right here. And the reason I want to do this one before I do anything else in Baiemont is because I'm going to put a little bit of high density in here. The reason for the high density is that this is near a college, so there's going to be a lot of students who may want to live nearby to the college, and This is an opportunity to put in some higher density housing, which per citizen is going to be a little bit cheaper. So students and young adults in general will prefer to live in high density housing just because it's cheaper for them. And we also have a lot of high density demand and no medium density demand, which is going to kind of go in here. This particular area is going to be inspired by some of the neighborhoods I've seen in Sofia, Bulgaria. And I haven't actually seen them personally, but I have looked around Sofia via Google Earth. And there's two places in particular that I'm going to take inspiration from. So one is near their stadium, which I think is the Vivacom Arena. And then the other is near a park, which is called Park Hippodrome. The thing I particularly like about the park area is that when you get down on the ground level, it feels as though the park itself kind of seamlessly integrates with the buildings around it. So I'll get started by placing down a few of the roads in here. And this is what I've gone with for the roadway network. Let me give a quick explanation of my decision making here. So first, I put in a pedestrian street that pretty much goes directly on line with the walkway into the college. And that's just to give a clear sightline view down to the college from this intersection, which I think is interesting. And then if you go over here, I did a similar thing just with the edge of the college right here on this pedestrian path. Within the triangle, I wanted to have at least some car connectivity, so I've just added this one street, and I intentionally made it angled like this, and I've seen that a little bit in Sofia where there's not so many gentle curves in the roadway, or at least there's a lot of places like this where the street just kind of changes at an angle, something like that. So with that in there, I'll get to placing in the buildings, and I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but there's that new Eastern European pack that's out, and there's a couple different building types within that. There's some low density, there's some low rent housing, there's some high density, and I think there's some medium and mixed use housing as well. In this case, it's going to be helpful to see the zoning grid, and I may actually go and use some of the paths to force certain buildings onto different roads. So I know I don't really want anything coming onto these roads right here, so I'm just going to block them off with some paths. So I was thinking about maybe keeping this road clear of zoning, but now that I look at it, I think it will be nice to have at least some commercial fronting this road, just to give it a little bit of a street presence, because on the other side, we just have the residential that does not butt up against this road. So I'll add a little bit of street presence on this side, and that'll probably just be some lower density commercial buildings. So with that in mind, I'm seeing that there's definitely some space in here where I could potentially put in another road and get some more buildings. The same goes for right about here. And then I think in here, we probably are good with the space that we have. I went back and forth a bit on how exactly I want to do this. I initially tried to get in some of the parking alleys in here. So alleys with the parking on the side, and they're a lot bigger than I realized. So it looked a little bit funky. I can show you what it looks like really quick. So if I change to this angled parking alley, upgrade it, I don't really like how that ends up looking, to be honest. And I think it just takes up a little bit too much space. So I'd rather have maybe a more custom parking solution than that. So the first set of buildings I want to get in there are going to be right along this corner of Moore Street right here. And I want to see if I can get the zoning right here. And I had to play a little bit more with the paths to get the zoning the way I wanted it, but I wanted it to be fronting here, and hopefully we can get a corner building out of this. I'm not sure if the Eastern European mixed use will have good corner buildings, but I'm going to try to get two different sizes in here and see what comes in. So I'll put a 3x3, let's say, and then I should probably unpause the game. It's been paused this whole time, and I'll try maybe 2x2 because that's just what happened to spawn in there. So I'll try the 2x2 there, see what we get in there. Okay, and those are both built in, and I don't know that I'm a big fan of what's happening here, in particular with this building here. One thing that I'm not sure about is it's just it really narrows this down, and I actually kind of want this to maybe feel a little bit more open. So I'm going to go back on both of these actually, and I probably won't even zone along Moore Street. I might save some zoning for over here on Brook Street. So I've placed down a high density Eastern European building right here, 2 depth and 3 width on the units. I'll see what comes in. It looks like it might be fairly large, but I'm probably gonna end up spacing out the buildings pretty far from each other. So I don't think it's too much of an issue that these will be fairly tall. All right, and that's in there now. And I think it might be okay. I want to get a look of it from probably around here. And I look up at it. Yeah, and after looking at it a little bit, I don't really think that's what I want. So I'm going to do something which I didn't exactly want to do here, but I think I'm going to put in maybe even a low rent house right here. I'll try that out and see what comes in. It looks already a lot smaller. So I think that's a good solution because that is going to be high density and it will kind of attack that particular demand. So with that in mind, I think I'm actually going to pepper a little bit more of that around here rather than any of the high density. And that way we don't have to use up the medium density demand, and we can also get some smaller buildings. While these homes were building in, I took the opportunity to put in a few additional paths, and that was something I really wanted to focus on in this particular area, is that there should be a lot of connectivity throughout for pedestrians. One of the things that you can't actually see right now is that there is some low density commercial zoned in here, and it is that Eastern European low density business. So we'll see what comes in there, but I think giving this area some smaller buildings should really round it out a little bit. One of the things that I want to do before I get any of the landscaping in there is I want to add in a few parks, and I think Moore Street right here is prime real estate for that. So I'm going to focus there first, but then I'll add in some parks just throughout, probably some smaller ones as well. That's the extent of parks that I want to put in here. So I put 3 right over here on Moore Street. So that's going to kind of be a popular street for recreation, and particularly for the students to come out right here and then just have a bite to eat or something, have their lunch here, study, whatever it may be. Over on this side, I wanted to place at least one sporting facility. So I put in a basketball court. It's about all that really fits in. Plus the outdoor gym fits in quite well in this particular corner. It's a very small asset. I'm inclined to leave the detailing for later, because one thing that I do want to happen is I want some of these commercial buildings to fill out before I start placing any sort of landscaping, because it's going to be very useful to be able to see how those buildings look and how they interact with the environment around them, so that I can have a better idea of how I want to landscape around it. So I'll leave that for now. The next thing that I want to do is I want to focus my attention in this particular area here, as well as actually probably over here in Baiemont, but I just want to add in a few additional farms, because I anticipate in the near future that we will be redeveloping some of this farmland here in Costanoa for a pretty major infrastructure project in the future. So I just want to make sure I'm thinking ahead of time and then placing down a few additional farms. So I think I'm probably just going to start over here in Baiemont, particularly because that area is not quite as built out as right here in Costanoa. So if we take a look over here, the roadway network itself is kind of just stopping where our boundaries are. So what that'll require me to do, and thankfully I do have enough money for this, is I'm going to buy a few additional tiles, and then I'm going to build out the roadway network just a little bit more. And in a case like this, it's always helpful to look at the topography before you make any decisions. So I can kind of see this bowl right here in the topography, and I know that I'll probably want the farms to be pretty much well contained within that bowl right there. And then the roadway network should follow the outer rim of that bowl. And then the other thing I want to think about is getting this road up this hill, up to this area, so that in the future I can bring it over this way and probably make a connection to the highway here. I won't be doing that today just because I don't want to mess up the traffic patterns for now. There's not really a need for that. but I do feel like it's important to have an idea of where your roads are going to be heading in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'll probably just buy these 2 tiles right here, expand this road up here, and then as well as this road to meet up with that one. And to be honest, that took a lot longer than it really needed to, just to make these 2 roads right here. But ultimately, I'm more satisfied with the way it looks now than what I had initially. So I think it was worth taking the extra time. But if we take a look here, we have pretty soft grades throughout. And this street right here called Concord Street is a little bit more interesting than just being, you know, a straight shot up the hill or something. And with that in there, what I'll do next is I'll place down the additional farms. And that is going to do it for this farm extension. I only added in these 2 grain farms and then 1 small livestock farm over here, just in that empty space that I left in a previous episode. I also added in some detail just with the tree lining. I tried to differentiate it a little bit from this earlier area, which was mostly lined with these spruce trees. And then I also added in a little forest back here, just to make it a little bit more unique than our other areas over here. I also just noticed something back here in Baiemont. I had been seeing these waiting for ambulance symbols, and I was curious like what was going on there. It's pretty obvious. I just didn't expand the district to include this college. That does remind me though, I think one of the things that I want to do is make the districts a little bit more granular, and that especially applies down here in Costanoa, where the city is large enough to where I think I could start making more distinct neighborhoods and give those proper names. For example, like right in here would be downtown Costanoa. For now though, I think what I'll do is I'm just going to expand Baiemont to include everything we've got over here. And that should fix that particular problem for now. And actually what I will do is I'm going to make a bunch of different districts over in Costanoa specifically, so that I can at least start getting some different neighborhoods. I probably won't name them all today, but I'll give you all an opportunity to propose some names, and I'll label the neighborhoods by number, just so it's a little bit easier to comment if anyone wants to provide any names. And assuming I've got my editing right, you should be seeing a screenshot of the new neighborhoods that I made. I did a little bit of editing to make it a little bit more clear where those neighborhoods are, as well as added in a compass so that you can see what is north, south, west, and east, in case that is something that you want to know about for naming. I've added in a 3-letter shorthand for the city name next to the neighborhood name, just so that I can more easily differentiate between city borders. For example, in the way distant future, let's say Baiemont and Costanoa share a border, I want to know which neighborhoods are in which of those 2 cities. So what I'll do is I'll give you all a chance to name any of these districts that you want, and anything that goes unnamed, I will name myself, and then I'll leave other opportunities in the future to propose changes to any of these neighborhood names. There's a couple that I'll be a little bit less flexible on, like downtown, for example, Japantown, Embarcadero. Those are some that I'm a little bit less flexible on. but generally I'm open to changing any of the names. I should also note that after I created all these new districts, I went through to all of the services that were covering their respective cities, and then I changed their operating districts to cover all of the neighborhoods in that city. So all of that should be taken care of. And then what I want to do next is I want to head down into Baiemont again, and I want to fill out, or at least get everything zoned for the rest of Baiemont here. And there's a couple spots left. There's this area here, which I want to do some of the French row homes. And then I'll try to fill out these other spots here, which are a little bit more unique, I guess, in that they're kind of on these corners on, you know, more populated streets. I also want to look again at this commercial area here. And I think this is obviously just not going to fly, having all these gas stations right here. I'm totally fine with there being some, but it just doesn't make sense to have, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gas stations. How that even happened, I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and delete pretty much all of them. I don't know why that is having an effect there, but whatever. That's interesting that it just keeps deleting whatever. That is crazy. It just keeps deleting this one French mixed housing, but hopefully that is a temporary thing. So with all those gone, they will eventually rebuild, but yeah, the commercial demand has not rebounded. And while I was renaming districts, I don't think anything came in here either. So it looks like commercial is just not something that we will need for the near future. So with that in mind, I'm going to just try to put in probably as many of these row homes as I possibly can without having to put any commercial in. And I'm going to start right here. And I'll probably also fill this out with some low density residential too. And I don't know how I feel about what is zoned in here. It is a little bit just too much of the same, I feel like. Maybe at street level it kind of looks okay, but from above it looks a little bit wild. I think, man, it's always a tough part with these assets, is that a lot of the times you just get the kind of the same exact stuff. So what I actually will do, and I'm seeing there's a corner here that I missed, but 2 corners actually. I might just pepper in a few more of the just standard French medium density, like these sorts of homes. Just a few in here to break things up, because right now it just looks a little bit awkward. All right, and I've filled out most of Baiemont here, and you can see a couple of those medium density buildings built in right over here. And I like it a little bit more. I think it just breaks things up just enough so it's not one entire block of just only these French row homes, which can, yeah, look a little bit jarring if it's just all that one particular shape and color. But I do like that you can kind of tell that it's a little bit less density on this side of this street right here, on this side of Grove Street versus on the other side. It's a little bit hard to tell with this French zoning, but it's definitely there, that slight gradient in density. The other thing I did is I just kind of mass zoned some European low density residential over here. And then I added a small office park right along here just to make use of this more highly trafficked road right here. The commercial is still yet to zone in any of these areas, so that's something I'm gonna have to keep an eye on, and maybe we can take a look right now at what's going on. There really is just nothing, it seems, so I'm not exactly sure what's gonna come of that commercial demand. I have had this issue before. I don't know if there's something underlying in the simulation that's going wrong or what, but I think what I can do is I can go in here to taxation, and I'll just lower their taxes by 1% and see if that has any effects. And actually, you know what, let's go a little bit more than that. Let's go 2% down, and I can even check. If I go in here, I can look at and see, yeah, we have electronics can actually probably go up 1, because that is a lot of money coming in from electronics, so I'm going to disincentivize that essentially. Everything else is pretty standard. Vehicles is low. I'm actually kind of okay with that. Food also kind of high, but I'm not really interested in overtaxing on that. So the rest I'll probably just keep as it is, maybe even reduce textiles down. Basically just everything other than electronics at the moment, just because that one's so high. And food will keep at 9%. You'll also notice that there are some areas that are a little bit less built out. So that would be right here in this quadrant right here next to that police station. And then also right here next to these 2 parking lots. So in the case of this side near the police station, I think I'm going to just leave it empty for now. It's quite a bit larger space, so I'm just going to leave some area for me to make improvements or add, you know, additional city services down the line. Over here, though, I think on this corner particularly, there is a good opportunity to use one of the signature buildings that came with the UK pack. And I'll show you which one I'm thinking of, and it actually fits quite nicely on this corner. It's going to be this Heath Pub with terrace. And yeah, it just fits really nicely right there on the corner, and we can take a look at what it looks like down below. It helps out a little bit with that like gradient that I'm trying to get out of this area right here. That's the same kind of deal that was happening with this Japanese post office. And then it also has a little bit of synergy with this bus station right here, so it livens up this area a little bit in general. That leaves a bit of space though right around here, and there's something I can do here, I'm sure, and I'll check out the parks that might fit here, but I think, yeah, that's probably the best I can do is fit a nice small park in right here. So I just placed down this modern pocket park because it kind of fits nicely into this longer space right here. The one thing I wish it did have is access on both sides. I'll kind of fudge it a little bit by extending the surfaces so it will at least look like you can get through. Of course, you won't actually be able to because the game's pathfinding doesn't allow for that. There are mods to accommodate for that, but I'm not going to worry too much about that for now. The remainder of this area, I'll probably just detail manually by hand and place in some props. And that'll be the extent to which I detailed this particular area. I just wanted to give it a little bit of something going on, so I added in that fountain, as well as just one food cart. What I'll move on to next is I'm gonna detail kind of some of the empty spaces that are in areas that I know that are more or less complete for now. So that's gonna be like putting in some trees in between the homes right here, as well as over here and here. And then probably placing some landscaping down along Concord Street right here to shield these homes from the traffic coming down Concord Street. The same will apply over here on Willow Street. And then I'm going to add in some detailing right here as well. The detailing in Little Sofia right here, I'm going to leave until I get those commercial buildings in, which I really hope I can get to happen in this particular episode. So I'll go ahead and get started right over here probably with the detailing of these 4 sections right here. that'll do it for the detailing in those particular areas. I also added in some street trees along Concord Street up until this intersection right here. So that'll just prevent parking from this area. So it's going to be acting a bit more like a through street right here. So it may not necessarily feel like in the game, but I think it incentivizes a little bit more to have this street acting more like a collector rather than a local road. And then if I go over to the other side here, a similar thing here with Willow Street, I added street trees there and then just some simple landscaping alongside these homes. And then I added in a few park benches and things in this particular area so that the people working in these offices have a place to sit down and walk around on their break. With all that in place, though, I wanted to check back in on Costanoa in one particular spot with the goal of possibly allowing our commercial here to build in, or at least some of it. And the reason I want to come back to Costanoa and the way I'll try to free up some of that demand is I'm going to come back right over here. We've got a big commercial strip, and I think I want to redevelop at least one of these buildings to be high density residential. It's our foremost demand right now, and I think I want to kind of start expanding out Costanoa's downtown into this particular street right here, Valley Street, since it's a popular corridor. The building that I'm looking at to redevelop is this particular one right here. The main reason for it is that it's just kind of in a good space for it. But also, now that I'm looking at it, you can see that that balance is minus 300,000. So reasonably, I could see that the owners here might want to buy out for their property. And the value of the land in this area is going to be really high. So actually, let's check that really quick. Let's check out the land value just in this area in general. Yeah, downtown Costanoa is pretty high if we just kind of hover over land value 140. Probably our highest is around here on the Embarcadero, 200. Yeah, that's some of our highest, and then it looks like over here is pretty high. So 140 is generally pretty high. If you look out over here, surprisingly, this is low, 86, despite it being the quote-unquote rich neighborhood. But I guess the way the game is interpreting it is that with all the transit connectivity and parks and school access here, this is just a very desirable place to live. So in the particular area I was looking right here, land value of 134, that is pretty high in terms of the overall land value, and I think you can even see at the neighborhood level. So this is another reason that I wanted to have the neighborhoods and places. I can start going around and looking at all the neighborhoods and how high the land value is. So you can see Embarcadero is super high. That makes a lot of sense, it being on the water. But then yeah, downtown Costanoa is relatively high, 127. It was at 134 earlier. This neighborhood right here, also relatively high. And you can especially see that compared to, for example, this industrial neighborhood where the land value is super low. But as this redevelops right here, the land value should start to creep up this way. And once this starts redeveloping, the land value would just continue creeping up this way. And I think in the future, this will be a fairly desirable area to live. So with all of that said, I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to demolish this one for now. It really won't free up a lot of commercial demand, if any, but I'm kind of just hoping at this point that something that I do is going to have an effect on that. I'm not exactly sure what is causing that demand to just be so perpetually low, but hopefully just placing in more residents will help with that. One of the building styles that I really liked that I used before was this UK high density housing. So I am gonna just zone, I'll see what happens if I zone the whole thing. I imagine a fairly tall building. It doesn't actually seem like it'll be too tall. I think it fits with the scale of the city, but we'll see. And there's some bigger buildings around here too. And this is also UK medium density housing. So I think it'll fit in pretty well with what we've got here. And there we have it. And I actually really like the scale of this building. It's big, but it is not crazy in how tall it is. And it also has a lot of space around it. So it doesn't take up too much of a dominating position in our small skyline here. And if we kind of zoom out, I think it really just it sticks out in a sense that it's not in our very core downtown right here, but it's a sign of further development down the road. And while I was here, there's one other change I want to make. I've just been looking at this particular building right here, and something about it is just bothering me a lot. I think it's the fact that this door is just facing straight out into the side of this building here. So I'm going to get rid of that one. I won't be placing a high density residential use there, but I will be doing something like some row homes right there. I just have to decide which of the available assets I will be putting there. And while I was waiting for things to build in right there, I did get the large city milestone, and not much to talk about here other than this $300,000 that I'm getting, and that's gonna be helpful for us because at this point I can actually pay off all the loans that I took last episode, which is pretty satisfying. And then I'll still have quite a bit left over, and I'm gonna start making a heck of a lot of money now. Looks like, yeah, 1.77 million per month, which is a huge improvement on some earlier episodes. And some of these buildings have actually built in now. And I did just go with the North American medium density row housing. And there was a particular reason I went with it. It's just because like these backyards right here open up the space right here so that these people have actual like windows to look out of, as opposed to if this was butting up too far back here, it would basically just make a wall like right next to these windows, which I definitely do not want. It's a very small detail, but I hope in the long run, making little decisions like that will improve the overall look and aesthetic of the city and just make things feel a little bit more natural. And I just wanted to pop back into our little Sofia area here, and it does look like we are finally getting some of these low density commercial businesses in, which is great. I think we have one there, and it looks like almost all of them are actually filled out, which is perfect. I think maybe that is the last one building right there. So fortunate that we got that in before the end of the episode. So this will probably be the final thing that I do is I'm just going to go through and make this actually feel like a garden city, or maybe like a garden neighborhood, you might call it. But I think it's just super important to making this part of the build look complete, because right now it just looks so sad, honestly, with like nothing here other than just, it just feels so empty, I guess. Nothing, that's to say nothing about the assets themselves. I think the assets are pretty cool, but without any sort of detailing, it just looks weird, to be honest. All right, and that last building is in there, so I will get to detailing. And before I continue detailing, I wanted to just talk a little bit about one of my philosophies around detailing in general, and particularly when it comes to placing trees and landscaping. So this is the first step I took in the detailing of this area, and there's a pretty good reason for basically the placement of all of these trees, as well as the size of these trees. So you can see for the most part, they're larger trees. Like we got these oak trees and then some spruce trees and pine trees, and those are some of the larger trees. And then in a couple areas, there's smaller trees, like we have these chestnut trees and birch trees, and I think this is a poplar tree. So what I do essentially as a first pass when I'm detailing is I'm going to look for areas that look a little bit awkward or particularly barren. So if we look right here, you can see that this side of this building is empty, and I don't have any like props or assets that I can place on the side of this building, as far as I'm aware, at least. Something like graffiti or something of that nature, a mural could go there. But I don't have that, so I want to shield it a little bit, and that's why I put such a large tree here. That's why I put this oak tree here. Another good option would have been a pine tree or a spruce tree. You can see a similar thing right here. I put this spruce tree in right there just to kind of blend things in a little bit better. And that was my first pass just around this entire area, is finding spots like that where a larger tree like that will really allow for the building to fit in just a tiny bit better. And then I'll start filling out other empty areas, like this big green area needs something. And I'm sure there's many ways to do this. That's just my philosophy around it. I think it works pretty well in most cases. But yeah, with that explanation out of the way, I'll just continue going through those iterations until I feel it's more or less complete. And this looks a lot better. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I think it just looks a lot more like it's kind of low density, but it, you know, features a lot of these higher density buildings. So it ends up blending pretty well. If we go down here to the street level, I'll just show off a couple things. So I put a small like theater right here, a small stage. So this could, you know, be live music, or maybe the college has a theater club or something, and they can come out here to perform. So I've got that there. And then another thing I did is right over here, I just added in a few extra assets and props to liven up this particular area. And then just throughout, I added a lot of benches because, you know, I want people to be able to sit and, you know, enjoy the trees and the scenery and the landscaping. So that was kind of my overall goal there, is I wanted it to feel like, you know, there's a lot of people walking around here, and I just wanted to feel like that is the purpose of this area. And I also wanted to just check back in on our street right here, Willow Street, and it looks like we did get the commercial there, and we do have a lot of our commercial demand back, so I'm not exactly sure what influenced that. Let's check what we've got. So local demand, unoccupied buildings, taxes. So the taxes are super low, so that did help. The local demand being fairly high is helping. So what I'm guessing is that people are, you know, finally moving into our new homes here in downtown Baiemont, as well as moving into our new high density residential building over here. So the overall demand is just increased in the region. So I'm happy to see that, and I think it will help us in the future in terms of being able to actually build out some of our areas that have remained somewhat vacant in recent times. And I'm particularly looking at this area right here. And while I'm here, actually, I mean, this is just something I keep forgetting, really, is I'm more or less putting it off, but it's mostly that I'm just forgetting, is to actually finish this area out. So I'm just going to put like one more Japanese asset there just to, you know, ease into the rest of this area. And then I can't remember what kind of zoning I was doing here. EU low density business. So I'm gonna stick to that, and it should fill out here. Let's see if I eat my words on that. Yeah, so for the most part, it's filling out pretty well here. So finally we'll be able to finish this particular corridor right here, and then in the future, I think that's another one right here that I need to work out. But I think as part of the expansion of this area, that is more likely to happen. So I'm not too surprised that this area has been left a little bit. I think it'll really come to fruition once this farm right here gets redeveloped, and just in general, these farms get redeveloped. So we've got a lot of money right now, and one thing that has been bothering me just more than it really should is this neighborhood right here has a little chunk taken out of it right over here because I don't own this tile. So I am just gonna buy this tile because I don't know, it's not necessarily the thing I need to be concerned about, the fact that that wasn't perfect, but now I'm a little bit more happy with that. So yeah, and just a quick note on this area in general, I do want to build out something here, but I want to leave it open to any comments as well. So that's why one of the reasons I haven't placed anything here is that yeah, I just want to hear if there's any comments on what I could place here. It's a very large area. I initially thought maybe I could place the college there, but yeah, we still have a lot of space here. I think for sure there'll be some additional low density residential. It is a little bit more hilly than the surrounding area. But yeah, low density residential tends to work just fine in those sorts of conditions. So I'm not too worried about that. But yeah, something to consider, what will we put in this area? I've got a few ideas, but yeah, I want to leave it open for now. That is going to do it for this episode, though. I'm really happy with how things progressed in this episode, particularly here in Baiemont and by this college. Well, we're finally at a point where Baiemont is starting to look like a more complete place. I know there's a lot that still needs to be done, but we do have all the key services in place. That's what I started with. I added in the postal service as well as telecommunications. The next thing I did was I added in a few new farms near Baiemont, and that's just in anticipation of redeveloping the farmland outside of Costanoa in the future. And then I also built a new neighborhood next to the college that is geared towards young people and students because of its high density residential uses. I took inspiration from Sofia, Bulgaria, and tried to make it look a little bit like a garden city sort of vibe. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it's definitely unique to both Baiemont, but also the region in general. And then lastly, I kind of added in detail all throughout Baiemont because now that we have more buildings filled out, it's a lot easier to actually place in that landscaping. As I mentioned earlier, feel free to leave any name ideas for any of the neighborhood districts that I made today. Feel free to leave that down below. But that is going to do it for this one, and I will see you in the next one.